There comes a point on the inner journey when the soul begins to move from a different source. It's no longer the mind seeking answers or the body craving comfort. Something much deeper awakens, an inner spark that ignites without your consent, planning or logic. It rises unexpectedly, as though something ancient within you has stirred after a long silence. This isn't euphoria, nor is it drive or motivation. It's a deep, primal vibration that shakes your core and transforms your way of existing in the world. This fire doesn't burn to destroy, it reveals. It doesn't force you forward, it wakes you up. And as it comes alive, everything that doesn't align with your true self starts to fall away. You can't keep lying to yourself. You can't hide behind roles or routines. Your soul starts to remember why it came here. And this memory doesn't speak in words, but arrives as a quiet urgency that changes everything. One of the first signs is an unexplainable inner pull. You can't trace it to logic or outside goals. It's a call that resonates from deep within your chest, a fire that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't wait for ideal timing. It erupts suddenly, as if it has waited too long to be lit and now refuses to stay dormant. This impulse may not come with clear answers, but it carries direction. It pulls you toward what is real and alive. It nudges you away from anything that dims your light, no matter how safe or familiar. Even if no one around you understands your shift, you do. You're not chasing something new. You're answering. Something timeless that's always been there. This impulse offers no roadmap, but it's unmistakable. It may not tell you what to do, but it makes one thing obvious: what you can no longer continue doing. You begin to wake with a subtle, constant unease, a restlessness that no longer fades with distractions or noise. It's no longer about filling emptiness. It's about facing the truth that something within you is ready to light up, to bring clarity, to spark transformation from the root. Pretending becomes unbearable. Comfort feels like betrayal. A voice deep inside refuses to be reasoned with, can't be silenced by distractions, and won't surrender to excuses. It doesn't yell, it smolders. Even if part of you longs to silence it to fit in, you know it's too late. A threshold has been crossed. The spark has been lit. You begin to see that what once satisfied now frustrates, not because you're ungrateful, but because you now recognize how you were dimming your own light to support structures that no longer support you. This fire doesn't tear down the external world. It simply makes misalignment impossible to tolerate. It drives you, not as punishment, but as a return to integrity. Yes, it can hurt, but it also sets you free. With every step toward truth, the fire strengthens, not as punishment, but as guidance. You can no longer drift back into sleep. Routine no longer soothes your soul. Something inside you has been awakened, something that doesn't need explanation, only space. It doesn't negotiate with fear, only with truth. This fire doesn't bring certainty. It brings you back to yourself, to who you were before the masks, before the compromises, before the quiet agreements that dulled your light. It doesn't ask you to know the destination, only to stop denying the start. Because once awakened, the fire doesn't go out. The only way forward is to let it burn with purpose. You also begin to realize that this inner impulse doesn't rely on external approval. You're no longer waiting for permission or for someone else to validate what you feel. You know deeply that this fire is yours. It was born with you, has always been within you, and now it's becoming visible. Not as a fleeting emotion, but as a force that shapes everything. Your speech, your choices, your way of being. That's what changes everything. You're not pursuing a goal, you're returning to yourself. Each time you listen to that call and act from it, the fire grows more vivid, more present. You start making different choices, not from guilt or fear, but from expansion, from that sacred place where something within you ignites, and only what resonates with that flame makes sense. Even in moments of confusion, the fire doesn't vanish. It remains like a glowing ember that resists being extinguished by doubt, fatigue, or time. It stays with you, quietly reminding you that something greater awaits. No matter how often you drift away, you can always return. The fire doesn't die with time. It fades only when you stop listening. And now, more than ever, you're beginning to listen. And so, almost without realizing it, this fire begins to shape your days, not with grand signs, but with small certainties. The kind you feel in your chest, the kind that seek no permission, the kind that burn but do not destroy, because they are not here to break you, they are here to uncover you. Gradually, you begin to remember what your soul always knew, that you came here to spark something the world can't extinguish. Second sign comes when you begin to release what once felt essential, without pain. People, places, routines, even long-held dreams begin to fall away. There's no bitterness, no drama, only a quiet clarity, as if a wiser part of you is making decisions on your behalf. You might not fully grasp why this detachment is happening, but deep down, you know this isn't about loss, it's about clearing space. The fire doesn't just light your path, it also burns away what no longer belongs. And surprisingly, this letting go doesn't leave you feeling empty. It brings a sense of lightness. It feels as if you're clearing space that had long been filled by habit or inertia. What once felt impossible to release now feels natural because you understand something vital. Not everything that played a role in your past is meant to stay with you as you evolve. Certain relationships, beliefs, even parts of your identity, they're not being rejected. They're being released. You're not running away, you're refining. You're tuning into what truly resonates with your essence. You no longer carry the past out of obligation. You stop holding on to what dims your light out of guilt. This fire isn't asking you to destroy anything. It simply makes it impossible to keep pretending. And this clarity doesn't come from thinking. It comes from energy. What you used to tolerate becomes intolerable. And instead of forcing yourself to stay, you choose to move on. This fire awakens a refusal to deceive yourself any longer. You stop justifying relationships, paths, or behaviors that don't align. Not from judgment, but from truth. There's no more space for pretending you're fine in places where you're clearly not. The fire now burns brightly enough to reveal everything you once hid from yourself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What you let go of isn't forgotten. You honor it, but you no longer need it. There's no paralyzing nostalgia, just quiet gratitude. You see that everything leaving your life is making room for something more in tune with who you are now. Even if you don't yet know where you're headed, your soul does. This space you're entering isn't emptiness, it's preparation. And every act of letting go, when it comes from honesty, makes the fire within burn even brighter. The fire within you. Each time you choose to honor your inner voice, that flame grows stronger. This isn't a fire fueled by fear or attachment. It thrives on your decision to value truth over convenience. And gradually, that's exactly what you're doing. You're letting go of who you used to be, creating space for who you're becoming. You'll notice that every time you release something from deep within, something shifts internally. You might not be able to explain it logically, but your body feels it, a lightness, a release, an expansion. Letting go hasn't become easy. It's just that holding on now comes at the cost of dimming your inner light. The fire awakening inside you doesn't compromise with what no longer resonates. It won't sustain itself on half-truths or outdated attachments. It lives only in what's real, right here, right now. Even when goodbyes are quiet, you know they're final. Not out of indifference, but from clarity. A part of you has already stepped forward. Staying would be like trying to breathe in a space without air. You've stopped defining yourself by what you're walking away from. Instead, you're shaped by the act of choosing yourself, by the quiet resolve not to turn against your own growth, even when it hurts. This inner fire is showing you that real loss isn't about losing others, it's about losing your connection to yourself. And that's not something you're willing to risk anymore. That's why your choices now come from awareness, not toughness. You're no longer afraid to walk alone if it means preserving your essence. You don't act from obligation. You move in response to what resonates. If someone or something doesn't align with that new frequency, you release it, not with bitterness but with respect. And in that once empty space you now sense presence. Because when you stop filling your life with things that don't align, you start to feel your essence more clearly. You understand now. It's not about filling every gap. It's about letting your own light expand into them. That flame, small but honest, is so true that you can no longer accept being lit by anything less than your own being. You've stopped fearing emptiness. You see it as the space where purpose takes root, a sacred opening where the real begins to take shape. And you, who are letting go without resentment, show that your fire already burns, not from reaction, but from clarity. Because when you let go from a place of truth, you're clearing the path for something more aligned to emerge. You now realize that this kind of letting go feels different. You're not closing chapters out of anger or urgency. You're moving on because your energy no longer belongs there, and it doesn't need to. You no longer force something that once mattered to continue existing. You've learned that love, meaning, and true connection never require self-betrayal to survive. You've stopped glorifying sacrifice. You've come to understand your soul wasn't meant to hold up what's falling apart at the cost of your own light. Holding on to what doesn't resonate isn't loyalty, it's abandoning yourself. And you're no longer willing to do that. You've chosen to come back to yourself, even if it means rebuilding from silence. But now that silence doesn't frighten you, it feels like fertile ground. Every release, even the painful ones, becomes a quiet statement that you deserve peace, that your energy matters, and that your path now prioritizes meaning over attachment. And the universe listens. It responds when it sees you let go, not from fear but from wisdom, because now you remember what's essential. What's real never leaves. What's true either remains or returns in greater harmony. And in that subtle act of letting go, you're not just freeing others, you're freeing yourself. You're clearing space for what's waiting to rise, for the voice inside that no longer has to compete with the outside world, for a fire that now burns steadily, clearly, and cleanly. You're learning to live without the burden of the unnecessary. You're walking with more ease, more truth, more of yourself. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It means that pain no longer leads. Now, truth does. Now the fire does. The part of you that doesn't speak already made the decision to keep moving forward, to keep burning with purpose. The third sign. You begin taking action without asking for permission. You're no longer waiting for others to validate your path. You're not depending on the world to tell you it's the right time. You simply act, not from recklessness, but from a deep inner push that refuses to be ignored. A quiet certainty is now guiding you, even when the entire path hasn't revealed itself. This fire isn't looking for justification. It wants embodiment. You're not acting from ego, but from soul. You don't move to prove anything. You move because you can no longer sit still while something inside you begs to be lived, created, expressed. It's as if a part of you got tired of waiting for perfect timing. You've come to understand the perfect moment isn't found, it's created through presence, choice, and a fire that won't extinguish just because the world says it's not time. You're no longer stalled by not yet. You're no longer held back by the doubts of those who don't feel what you feel. You've started to treat your inner pull as your compass. You've realized this movement isn't about quick rewards. It's about alignment. Alignment between your action and who you're becoming. All that you've kept inside out of fear, now you release it. not because you know exactly where you're going, but because you've learned that waiting too long is its own form of self-abandonment. Some ideas, decisions, and expressions, if not acted on now, will fade. And you, who have carried this fire for so long, are no longer willing to let it die just to avoid discomfort. You begin with honest steps, small but real. You make choices that once felt too risky, but they don't come from chaos. They come from a quiet steadiness inside that says, "This now reflects who I am." And even if the world doesn't respond right away, you've stopped waiting for it to, because now you understand that acting from your inner fire is already a response, an agreement with yourself. This new strength isn't forceful. It's calm, steady, and firm. It doesn't demand or compromise. It's the quiet inner voice that warns, if you don't move now, the fire will turn to ash. And you've made a choice. You won't let that happen again. You now see that acting from your core isn't a luxury. It's essential. You've also realized this kind of action doesn't need applause. You're not seeking validation or understanding. You act because not acting would betray your own soul. Something fundamental has shifted inside. You're not moving to become someone. You're moving because you already are someone. And that someone can no longer stay silent in places where their fire has no space. Every move you make from your center strengthens your presence. You're not chasing big wins or quick results. Your inner fire doesn't rush. It's devoted. And you've stopped waiting to feel ready, because you now see that no one ever really feels ready for what matters most. The fire doesn't ask for clarity. It asks for commitment. Waiting for everything to make perfect sense only leads to a slow, unnoticed burnout. But once you surrender to it, something new begins, not the whole path, but the next step. A step so clear you can't ignore it. And when you take it without needing approval, your fire grows. That's what fuels it. Internal alignment, not external praise, not others' opinions, not outcomes. Just your decision to stop delaying. Yourself. Even if no one sees it, you know something inside is waking up. Every time you act from that fire, everything shifts. Your energy becomes focused, your thoughts settle, your emotions line up. The inner conflict fades because you've found direction and you don't need to explain it. You simply feel the deep relief of having chosen yourself. You've started shaping who you are through action, not by waiting. You're discovering your truth by moving. You no longer need someone else to confirm the timing. Deep down, you already know it's now. You also realize that each time you act from your flame, your entire energy shifts. You don't need to analyze it. You feel it. In your chest, in your breath, in the lightness that comes from no longer carrying the tension that once felt normal when living by expectations instead of truth. It's not that things have gotten easier. It's that the hard things no longer stop you. Because to move with fire is to move with roots. That makes you steady. You no longer act out of habit. You don't work just to survive. You don't speak to fill silence. Now every action carries meaning. Every step holds presence. When your fire drives you, your efforts leave a lasting mark, even if no one notices. External recognition no longer matters. You know it, and that knowing is more powerful than any outside approval. You also see there's no going back. You can't return to living disconnected without feeling it like a wound. Because now you understand the difference between acting on impulse and acting from alignment, and that distinction changes everything. You've learned that moving from where it doesn't drain you, it expands you. You don't lose yourself. You refine. You don't freeze. You act even in uncertainty. And something deeper begins to take shape. The fire gives you identity. You no longer define yourself by your past, your roles, or the stories others told. You define yourself by your ability to move from your essence, from a force that no longer fades or depends on anything outside you. That's purpose, where your inner truth takes real form in the world. And you don't need anyone to confirm your path. You feel it. not through results, but through resonance, because when your inner fire becomes your compass, no doubt can shake the certainty of a soul ignited. The fourth sign is this: your resistance to change begins to dissolve. You stop fighting what's shifting. You no longer hold on to the familiar out of fear. Instead of fearing change, you begin to embrace it. Not because it's all clear, but because something inside has realized that change isn't here to break you, but to reveal you. Your fire has prepared you to face transitions without losing yourself. What once felt like chaos now begins to look like possibility. You find that change doesn't overwhelm you anymore. You don't feel like a victim of movement. You've become an active part of it. You've stopped looking for stability in external things. Now it's your own ability to adapt without dimming your light that grounds you. You don't cling to what used to work because you understand that yesterday's tools can become today's traps. Your fire has taught you to release without losing yourself, to move without breaking, to evolve without self-betrayal. Each transition no longer feels like a threat, but an awakening. Something in you grows stronger every time you let go with courage, every time you take a new path, even without all the answers. And it's not impulsive, it's radical trust. Your fire doesn't ask for guarantees, it asks for space. So when change arrives, you don't resist it, you recognize it. You notice that the unknown no longer weighs you down. You once avoided it, feared it, delayed it, but now, though the uncertainty still brings dizziness, it also brings momentum. Because your fire doesn't push you toward safety, it leads you toward truth. And you, who now know the cost of self-betrayal, choose more clearly what reflects your truth, even without assurance. Change no longer feels like loss. It feels like growth. Even amid disorder, something in you aligns. Even when the world trembles, you are steadier, not because you're untouched, but because everything that touches you now makes you stronger. You've stopped seeing movement as a threat. It's part of your evolution, a necessary reshaping of someone who's lit from within. You no longer try to control every step. You trust what you feel more than what you planned. You've let go of the need to know how everything ends because your fire doesn't seek outcomes, it seeks transformation. And you are finally ready to walk through that. You've also come to see that every change, even the hard ones, brings a message you can't ignore. You've become so aware of misalignment that now you sense when a chapter has ended before it even announces itself. You no longer wait for signs from outside. Your fire is enough. It tells you wordlessly when something has run its course. With humility, you make room for what's next. You've stopped settling for stagnation. Staying in what no longer fits isn't stability, it's abandonment of self. And while the leap into the unknown still stirs fear, you now trust that you can soar. Because every time you've dared to release what no longer served you, life offered something better, clearer, more aligned. That memory sustains you. You no longer see repeated cycles as punishment. They're your teachers. If something returns, it's not for you to hold it the same way, but to choose differently. Your fire has awakened an awareness that refuses to keep repeating what once felt normal. And that gives you real power, not to react, but to respond. Not to resist change, but to move with it and still stay grounded. You now know that change isn't a break from purpose. It's how purpose unfolds. You're not here for just one mission. You're here to grow, to evolve, to let past versions of yourself fall away when they no longer reflect who you are. And your fire reminds you of that. Burning when you stay too long in one place, nudging you forward not to harm you but to guide you, and in that quiet recognition you realize there's no going back. When fire leads, even detours realign you, even loss lightens your path, because now everything that shifts, whether or not you understand it, moves in harmony with the purpose your soul has already set in motion. Sign number 5. Your truth no longer fits into small spaces. You've started to speak up, to express the parts of you you once hid just to keep the peace. But now you can't stay silent, not out of defiance, but because silence was suffocating. Your fire has begun to push your voice outward, not to shout, but to resonate. You're not craving attention, you're seeking alignment. That's why the parts you once concealed now emerge with quiet strength, and everything changes. You also notice how your way of speaking has shifted. You no longer speak to persuade, you speak to free yourself. You no longer shape your words out of fear of being too much. You speak with respect for your truth. Your voice is no longer a tool for fitting in, and you've become a channel for truth. It may not always be comfortable, but it's yours, and that's enough. You begin to notice how long you've been holding back, how often you traded your peace to protect someone else's, how many times you stayed silent to avoid tension. But now, the fire within won't let you stay quiet when your truth needs to be spoken. What isn't expressed becomes stuck, and you've chosen to set yourself free. You're no longer concerned with being too much, too sensitive, too intense, too honest, because you've stopped adjusting your voice to fit into spaces that were never meant for your truth. You've come to understand your energy was never meant to go unnoticed. It was meant to bring change. Each time you speak from that inner fire, you don't overpower, you illuminate. You don't attack, you reflect. You don't push, you awaken. Even when words fail, your presence speaks. Your gaze, your stillness, your energy. What you once held back now moves with a new rhythm because your voice is no longer just sound. It's the expression of your soul. And that soul has remembered its role, to hold truth, even when it's hard, even when it's not accepted. Most of all, you've stopped seeking approval just to be yourself. This isn't ego, it's authenticity. You're no longer waiting for a safe space, you've become that space. You're the sanctuary, because when you speak from the fire within, you're not looking for applause. You're affirming that you won't keep dimming your flame for anyone's comfort. You also notice something deeper happens when you speak. Honestly, something inside you begins to align, not because others validate it, but because you've stopped splitting yourself apart. With each truth expressed, you're not just freeing yourself, you're becoming whole. And that wholeness feels like peace, like expansion, like breathing without needing permission. You've released the need for ideal conditions to show up as yourself. You now understand that choosing to be a vessel for truth is a sacred act, even when unnoticed. You're no longer speaking to be heard. You're speaking because what lives inside you can no longer remain hidden. You know that every time you suppress your light, something dims within you, and you're no longer willing to allow that. You also realize your voice doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need all the answers, flawless delivery, or a polished story. You just need to be honest, steady, and present. Fire doesn't demand perfection, it asks for surrender. And you've begun surrendering with less shame, less guilt, and more commitment to your real feelings. And it shows, not in volume, but in energy. Your presence speaks before you do. You stop trying to explain what others aren't ready to understand. You simply live it. You don't argue your truth anymore. You embody it. Because real power doesn't come from what's loud. It comes from what's rooted in soul. By speaking from your fire, you also learn to stay grounded when there's no response. Not everyone will understand your truth, but instead of shrinking, you remain, because now you understand. Your role isn't to please, it's to awaken. And awakening can be uncomfortable, but it transforms. You're no longer a reflection of what others expect. You're the outcome of a voice that finally found its place. And that voice, even if unsteady, even if still learning, can no longer be silenced. Because your fire holds it now, and that fire won't fade. The sixth sign arrives quietly. You're not making major moves. You're not forcing anything. Yet everything begins to change. People leave without drama. Others enter your life unexpectedly. Places that once brought comfort now feel distant. On the outside, nothing appears different. but inside, your energy has shifted. A fire has been lit, and it's reshaping your world. You might not notice it immediately. You may even feel unsettled. But soon you recognize this isn't chaos, it's alignment. The path ahead is being cleared. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. You start to realize this reordering of your life isn't loss, it's resonance. There's no need for conflict, no need to chase closure. What no longer aligns simply fades, effortlessly. It's as if the fire within you is uncovering what's false, outdated patterns, fear-based ties, old attachments. You don't need to fight. You don't even need to choose. Life, now in step with your truth, begins making the decisions for you. Yes, it may hurt at first. There's confusion, grief, but that pain gives way to relief. You stop pretending. You stop forcing yourself into roles that no longer reflect your soul. You don't have to hide to belong anymore. And in that release, peace finds you. Not the shallow kind that clings to comfort, but the deeper kind that comes from living your truth. You begin to stand with more certainty, speak with more clarity, act with more honesty. You stop shrinking to fit in. You stop giving your energy away just to avoid tension. You stop holding back just to keep things easy. Because this fire within you isn't trying to destroy, it's trying to reveal, and anything built on pretense or outdated ideas of who you were will dissolve, not with conflict, but with grace. No pressure, no force, just organic transformation. And here's what's most beautiful. As your old world fades, a new one emerges. You start meeting people who don't just like you, they truly recognize you. People who don't deplete your energy, they enrich it. People who don't ask you to dim your light, they help it shine brighter. So if this feels familiar, if these shifts resonate, if you're living this change, know that you're not alone. This is the path of awakening, of alignment, of inner power. And if you're on that path, you're exactly where you need to be. If this message stirred something within you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next insight your soul is waiting for. This space isn't meant for everyone. It's for those ready to release the version they were taught to be and rise into the truth of who they really are, because this is only the beginning.